A quick shout out to Alan, who left us a fantastic 5-star review on Apple iTunes. The title was "A Must for Any Tradie Who Wants to Grow," and the review said, "You will take something from each and every podcast. You will have a few. I wish I knew that sooner moments along the way too. Get on it, Alan." Alan, thank you very much for that review. We much appreciated. Folks, we really do appreciate these reviews. If you can head across to Apple iTunes or Stitcher or SoundCloud or Spotify or wherever you consume your podcasting media, please leave us a review and I will read it out. So there's a bit of an incentive for you. Thanks, folks. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Toolbox Talks on the SiteShed podcast. My name is Matt Jones, and today you are joining us for a discussion around exit strategy. Now, I know this has been a bit of a hot topic in the group, and we've got a lot of listeners out there where you guys are at that stage in business and you want to learn a little bit how you could potentially be acquired in the future. So today I have brought a guest on the show who is going to give you some amazing insights into that world. Not only does he teach it, he has also done it twice, and he's in the middle of doing it the third time himself. So this guy certainly knows and is qualified to be teaching on this topic. This podcast did go for quite a while, and it is very, very educational. So I hope you get a lot out of it. If you do get a lot out of it, do me a favor, go and share it with somebody else, because the more we can spread this sort of knowledge around, the better the whole industry is. Of course, head across to iTunes and leave us a review if you liked it. That would be much appreciated. And if you want to continue the conversation, head across to the private Facebook group. That's the SiteShed private Facebook group. You can find that by going to facebook.com/groups/the SiteShed, all one word. And you can jump in there, you can join the discussion, and you can meet the amazing guests that we have on these shows, including the one from today. So, there's some great resources being left behind for this podcast, guys. You can go ahead and get that through the show notes at thesiteshed.com. You can also get hold of them through the resource section of the SiteShed website, which is thesiteshed.com/resources. Anyway, that's enough for me. Let's jump right in and enjoy this amazing conversation on how to structure your business for exit strategy. For those of you guys that have been following the SiteShed podcast and in our community for a while, you know we do enjoy doing some pretty darn cool things. Our Learn and Travel program has been around for a few years now, and we effectively take trade business owners across to amazing destinations where we can either surf or ski. So the last few years we have been traveling to New Zealand on ski, learn and ski programs. We've been traveling to Japan earlier this year on a ski and learn program. That's 2018. And then we also traveled to the Maldives for our first surf and learn in 2018. However, in February of 2019, we are holding yet another ski and learn, and it's going to be in the lovely Furano in Japan. And Furano is basically up in the Hokkaido region, which is powder heaven. So for all of you guys that want to come along to that, and I thoroughly encourage you to, because they are such cool events. They are just the best. It's a tax-deductible trip. You get to go skiing or surfing in amazing locations. And this time we're heading to one of the best powder resorts on the planet. So guys, head across to the siteshed.com/events, and you can see the link there to the upcoming event. It's limited tickets, guys. Obviously, we've got to secure hotels and that kind of thing, so we can only take so many. We launched it a couple of days back, and it is already filling up. So if you want to come, I thoroughly encourage you to get in there and get your deposit secured. If you've got any questions, you can hit us up on the Facebook group.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the SiteShed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Dom Rubino, welcome to the SiteShed podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Nice to be here.
Absolutely, all the way from Vancouver, Canada.
Canada, eh?
No doubt about it.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world. Spent a lot of time there.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a fanatical skier, so I've skied BC over.
That's the thing to do here.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, I love it. And we've had many guests on the show, actually, Canadians. We've got quite a big following over there. So it's good to have you grace us with your time.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I've had a couple of Australians on my podcast as well. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
I understand that for a lot of your listeners, I have an interesting accent.
Yeah, I know. It's always funny. I know I was presenting at a big workshop over in Las Vegas last year, and like that, there was some pretty deep South people there, and they were like, "Man, you guys speak real funny," and I was like, "Hang on a minute."
Just wait there, foghorn leghorn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, so cool, Brian. You're from the Cabinet Maker Profit System, and you basically work with trade-based businesses, primarily joinery, cabinet makers, furniture makers, etc., helping them with their, I suppose, business growth and strategy. Is that more or less on the money?
That is absolutely correct. Yep.
So why don't you give us a bit of a rundown as to I suppose how you ended up there? I know you were saying offline there that you've been associated with Adrian in the past through the Focal Point training system and Brian Tracy and that kind of thing. So maybe give us a bit of a background.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when you tell Adrian that you had Dominic on the podcast, he's going to make sure he's got a mouthful of milk so it comes out his nose. He'll laugh. But I've been in business coaching for 18 years now, and most recently, and this is how I know Adrian, is that I have a group of business coaches around the world where we work with businesses of all types and show them how to, work smarter, not just harder.
Yeah.
But for myself and my own personal journey, I needed to travel a lot less. It was affecting my family quite negatively. And so I decided to sell my position in Focal Point, which is where I was partners with Brian Tracy. And I think Brian's really well known in Australia, actually.
Yeah. I don't know a lot about his program, but I know a lot of people that do rave about it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, people have known about it for years. There's people out there with cassettes.
Right.
Of his, and now you've got listeners who are going, "What's a cassette?"
Yeah, I know, true.
Yeah,
I can barely remember.
So when I'm exiting Focal Point as we speak right now, this week, documents are being drawn up. But when I wanted to figure out how to reinvent myself, it had to be without travel because my family is just too important to me and I needed to keep that whole and happy. So I thought, well, you know what? I've always enjoyed working with trades, and very specifically, I've worked with lots of different people in the finished wood trades. So I decided to start a podcast and a website in this space and just continue doing my business coaching, but in a vertical I really enjoy. Mm-hmm. So that's what brought me to being Cabinet Maker Profit System guy.
Fantastic. And tell us a little bit about the podcast.
So the podcast is one where we serve the finished wood trades industry, right? So the owners of cabinet shops, architectural millwork shops, people that make furniture. I interviewed Evan Dunstone from over there in Australia just a couple of weeks ago. And you may not know this, but people who make coffins and caskets as well. Anybody in the finished wood trades, windows, doors, all of that stuff, they get value. They come to our website and podcast to learn more about the business side of running a shop.
I've heard that's a bit of a dead-end business, though. Lame. Cool. And so how many episodes deep are you?
You know, we're 23 published.
Yep.
But as I was saying, so right now as we're recording, we're in August. I'm produced out till December.
Yeah. Perfect.
So I've got a huge backlog of material and more guests coming, and it's very exciting.
Yeah.
And lots of questions are coming from listeners too, which I love because then I can be really specific in how I go build the next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the good things, I suppose, about building a podcast that has a big once you build a community around the podcast, like we've done at the Site Shed, you'll find that so many of the conversations that come out of that community will fuel the content for the podcast, which is brilliant because it means you can involve your listeners and they love it, and it also means you can you're creating content that's actually relevant to what they want to hear.
Yeah, is that why people are so active on your Facebook?
Pretty much. Oh, it's one of the reasons. Yeah, I mean the group is incredibly engaged, and they're and because we value their feedback. We want to hear things like I got people email me every week. We have an email that goes out, and every week I get emails back from people saying, "Hey, how about we do this? How about we do this?
How do we do this?"
So if something hasn't popped up within the group, then it certainly does in emails, and it's great. I mean, it's what they want to hear, and we're there to serve them, so that's why we do it.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So there's a little tip for you. That's cool. So ironically, you're in the stage of, I suppose, exiting from Focal Point, which is kind of what we're talking about today. The topic of this podcast is going to be how to exit your business. There's only three types of buyers that are going to buy your business. And so I'm really curious to dive into this because I know we have a lot of listeners out there that are at that stage in business where they've gone through the startup growth and they're in that exit strategy sort of stage, and now they're looking for options. And there's very little content out there, or I should say there's very little commendable content out there anyways, referable content out there in relation to this sort of stuff. I certainly have done very little on it, and probably because we've just never really had the right guest on the show that knows what they're talking about. So being that you're actually going through this yourself, it seems pretty relevant.
It does. And mine was built out of scorch marks and burning because as I mentioned to you in our pre-interview, I've now exited 2 companies in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
One of them was pretty large. It was 120 million in revenue.
Yeah.
And then this one here at Focal Point, we've got, over 200 business coaches all around the world. And those are pretty intricate sales. But what I learned is that I have to be buyable in order to sell. I think that makes sense at face value, right?
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, there were times though that we fumbled it and we weren't ready to be bought, and that's where the mistakes were. Or we had people throwing, pretty weak offers at us just casually, and we, chase them for 6 months. It just wasn't the way to go.
We put a I'm guessing it's going to be all very relevant. We'll probably get into it, but when you're saying you've got to be buyable, like for years we've been putting a lot of emphasis, and lately especially, like we've been really doubling down on content, program, system structure, on how to help guys, businesses really implement, systems, processes that effectively replace you as the business owner, which I guess makes it viable, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, I know in my experience, when you're going in this stage of acquisition for a business, you're typically buying 2 things. You're buying the systems and processes that run the organization, and you might be buying the database. But apart from that, you don't necessarily want to always be buying staff members or managers or business owners.
Yeah, you're buying the cash flow.
Right.
I'm buying your business. And, when you see true entrepreneurs out there, it seems like they don't even care what they're buying. They got an auto dealership and a window washing company and an insurance underwriter. What are you doing? But those guys understand they're buying cash flow streams. And that's actually one of the types of buyers, is the strategic buyer. They actually pay a premium for your business. Okay. So those are the one of the 3 types. I can get into that more. There's actually a really good visual. This whole topic needs a visual. So I have one if you ever want to share it, that lays it out just as a simple picture, and then you just draw the lines where you want to go, and that's who you sell to. Yeah, right. Okay, cool. Well, we'll definitely I'll post that in the show notes. So for the listeners out there, actually Dom's left behind a document called The 3 Types of Buyers for Your Contractor Business. So head across to the show notes. You'll see you'll be able to get access to that, and it will also be in the resource section of the site shed. So you can head across there and grab it too. All right, Dom, let's dive in. So let's talk about these elusive 3 types of buyers that are going to buy your business. I'm intrigued. Yeah. Well, actually, why don't we scale it back? First of all, who are we talking to here? Is this a business owner conversation? Yes, 100% business owner conversation. Okay. Actually, why don't I say this? 99% business owner conversation, 1% business buyer conversation. Okay. But for the business buyer, it's an evil tool. We don't actually want the buyers to know this. Okay, we want the seller of the business to know this. So buyers, do you just tune out, right? Yeah. Yeah, I don't want you knowing this stuff. Well, it's interesting because I mean, I know we have a lot of listeners out there that do acquire businesses. I've worked in companies that have acquired businesses, like aggressively as well. Like, I mean, purchasing 3 a roofing company, and 2 plumbing companies, in the space of 8 months. Just adding them to the organization. So yeah, there are people out there that are doing it. So I think this is very relevant. It is relevant, and it helps us for all aspects of growing the business, because whether you're going to sell or not, getting it ready to sell is what gets you profitable. Gotcha. So why don't I tell you what the 3 types of buyers are, and then we can start to pick it apart, and you can come at it from any angle you like, and I'll do my best to walk you through it. Go for it. So the first thing we do is we think about it from the owner's perspective of what's most important to them. And this changes over time, and it changes by life situation. But is money the most important thing? And I can already hear people laughing, listening to the podcast. So, Dom, what else? What else is important? Well, time might be important. Yeah, if you're going through a family situation, which might sound like rhymes with schmovorse, or if you somebody's passed away, things like that, breakup of a partnership unit, time becomes important. And then the other one that really does become important as you get older is owner involvement. And so those are components we have to take into account. And this is laid out much easier in the graphic that goes along with this. But the 3 types of buyers are the strategic buyer. That's number 1. And that person pays a premium for your business. They pay a premium. They pay you more than the actual on the books value is. And we all want that strategic that buyer, right? The second type of buyer is the entrepreneurial buyer. And this is kind of the middle of the road buyer. They're going to pay you what the company's worth, plus or minus a little bit. But it's where most of us think about making the sale when we're talking about selling to family or selling internally. And there's good and bad with that. The good is that there's very low risk that that company is then going to be in trouble because the people buying it are already usually working there and they just keep running it.
Right.
And then the third type of buyer is the opportunistic buyer.
Okay.
I don't know if you add sound effects later, but this is where you cue the music. That's it. That's the music. Yeah, the opportunistic buyer pays you below fair market value.
Okay.
And there's pros and cons to each, right?
Okay. And so what are some examples then? If I look at, say, a strategic buyer, so would that be somebody who's got like say they're a plumbing company and they wanted to add roofing to it and they thought, hey, this is a good way to double our business. Let's buy this roofing company.
Yeah. So that might be something, but if you were a plumbing company, I would expect that you'd go maybe further into HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning.
Right.
Because you're already used to running on contracts and you understand the residual recurring revenue aspect or model.
Right.
But you might also say, look, as a plumbing company, and we're operating in New South Wales, we want to go to Western Australia. Mm-hmm. Or different areas. So you're expanding geographically. So strategically, you want to buy other companies that are similar to yours. And the immediate cash savings you have is you can, and I'll say this respectfully, you can wipe out their administration. You don't need 2 bookkeepers. You don't need 2 receptionists. You don't need 2 purchasers. You can do it with 1 or 1.5. So a strategic buyer is looking for a way to make more with less.
Okay, I gotcha. So when you say they're willing often to pay a premium, why would they be willing to pay a premium? I mean, why wouldn't they be paying what it's worth?
Because they know how to put nitrous oxide into your business.
Okay.
They know where you're running it like a shop and they're going to run it like a company.
Gotcha.
Right? So they have their buying systems. So perhaps just by buying you, they're going to increase their volume of purchasing power with a supplier, and that's going to reduce their cost by 2% right there. They know where the holes are and they're going to plug them.
So if you're looking for, say, like a classic example that everyone would be familiar with, would you say like a golden example of a strategic buy would be when Apple bought Beats by Dre?
Yeah. Extend that reach.
Yeah.
Right. So they already had the advertising, they had the right market. That was the right brand that even added an accelerator to their already pretty hot brand.
Yeah. So then the entrepreneurial buyer is somebody that I guess doesn't have those frameworks in place or doesn't yet have that ability to go, okay, we're going to buy this and blow it apart.
Yeah.
They're just willing to grind it out.
They might. When I started, and remember, this was 18 years ago. The big thing that the entrepreneurial buyer was doing, which was the son buying from the dad or the family buying from the, whoever had, they were like, we're going to add computers because dad's been fighting us on this forever. Yeah. So believe it or not, that was the big technological advancement. So sometimes that entrepreneurial buyer is just dying to take over control so they can implement new systems and processes and ways of doing things.
Yeah. Okay.
But they are usually very well known to the company. Or they are like a Main Street business. They're brought to you through a broker. And so they're going to pay some multiple of EBITDA. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciations, and assets. And they want to follow the math and pay very close to what the company's actually worth.
Yeah.
Very different than the strategic buyer who's actually willing to pay you more to get instant geographic expansion or instant buying power or instant new market penetration.
Okay. And then from an opportunistic buyer, that would be someone that
cue the music, buddy.
Is just looking for the low-hanging fruit, yeah?
Yeah. They're going to pay you less than what it's worth. They're very honest about it, but they're also going to pay you quickly and let you get out.
Right.
And so tragically, quite often, this is where the personal situation comes in. Something's happened. The person is mentally out of the game. Let's say they've got to take care of an aging parent or the partners are having a tiff and they're not able to get over it. And somebody else just swoops in.
Yep.
Right. So these people are called vulture capitalists and for a reason. Right. But the benefit is they can get you out of there. And when you look at the graphic, time becomes important. Right. An opportunistic buyer will complete that deal in 0 to 6 months.
Right.
And obviously, the closer to zero time, the closer to lower dollars you are, because they're gonna charge you for that risk.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't we talk a little bit about, I suppose, as a business owner, which is what we're talking to 99%, how we go about framing up the different models of the business designed for the different types of buyers.
Yeah. So a strategic buyer is looking for a certain kind of business that they want to buy. And quite often, if you don't look right, they're not going to buy you.
Right.
And what that means is you've got to have your accounting in order. You've got to have your systems and processes in place.
Yep.
because ultimately they just want to plug and play. They want to come in and just take over operations and know that it's going to spit out whatever percentage you're reporting. And, for trades businesses, I'm going to say this, and I know it's a generalizing statement, but when I say clean books, I mean real books.
Yeah.
Right. So I know there's a lot of cash business that goes on with trades. That's fine. No big deal.
Yeah.
But there comes a point in time when that has to stop.
Yeah.
And then all has to transition to being on the books. And then because the strategic buyer wants to buy that cash flow.
I think today with the introduction of technology and, programs, job management, mobile invoicing, that kind of thing, I feel like it may be not as prevalent as it was 20 odd years ago. What do you reckon?
Maybe I'm colored because I live in a city called Vancouver, Canada, that just legalized marijuana, which used to be one of our biggest cottage industries, which led to a lot of $20 bills.
Right.
So why don't we delicately back away from this part of the conversation?
Okay.
Before I get anybody I know in trouble. There still is lots of cash business that goes on.
Yeah.
And the point here is that you have to run your business in a way that a strategic buyer wants to see it when they look at it. Because they're going to have a professional accountant look at your books.
Yeah.
And they're going to do a very thorough look at it. And you want it to be able to stand up to scrutiny, because anytime it doesn't, down comes the price.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly right. And so, I suppose for the listeners out there, should we all really be in the mindset of building our business that could be targeted towards a strategic buyer? Is that the dynamic here? I mean, we don't necessarily want to build a business that is going to we're going to be able to sell to an opportunistic buyer, right?
No, you don't. And you know what? I think the real simple answer that you might be asking me is to give you is systems. Anything above opportunistic buyer really relies on systems.
Right.
Once you've got really established systems and processes in place and the company runs without the owner having to have their finger on everything, you've moved up the scale already.
I've always found it, and maybe you can shed a bit of light on this. I mean, I'm sort of going through the stage at the moment ourselves where we're systemizing the business so that it's just removing myself from operations in different areas, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'm thinking to myself, it'd be great. I mean, I've had a lot of people and coaches and things say to me, you want to do that so you can sell the business. And then I'm thinking, well, if I've got a business that runs without me even being there, why the hell do I want to sell it?
Yeah, no, you sell it to yourself.
Right.
I mean, really what you're doing is you're selling it in exchange for time so that you're on the beach somewhere, well, for you, in your case, skiing somewhere while the company's running. And you just duck in for an hour every Wednesday to make a phone call back to the shop and hear the metrics.
Right.
So in that case, you're selling it to yourself. You're not always building it so you can sell it. You're building it so it's sellable.
Gotcha.
Right. And if you worry about your family, and I shouldn't word it that way because that implies that I'm challenging you to ask whether you worry about your family. But for myself, I want to build a business that runs without me so that if that bus comes along, my family has something to sell.
Right.
Because if I have to have my finger on everything going on and I'm taken out of the picture, then I'm doing my family a disservice. And the whole reason I'm doing this is my family.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So let's talk then a little bit about, I suppose, well, I mean, you tell me, do we want to talk about the process of establishing systems, framing it up, ascertaining what needs development, what needs to be built out, what we need to offload, et cetera, et cetera?
We can. Yeah. I mean, there's an order of operations. There's a way to go about this. It's probably something that you're very familiar with as well in your line of work. It's just establishing communication and accountability within the company.
Well, I mean, that's a really good point. Like, and I've found that, within any business, 99% of problems can be eliminated through communication.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. It always comes down to communication downfall in my experience, whether that's within staff or within the organization or whether that's communicating things to customers or whatever it might be. At the end of the day, it always needs that's where the needle nearly always needs to point.
That's right. The humans are the problem. That's the takeaway message. If there are no humans involved, this would be really easy.
So then where do you start? I mean, you always hear this, this phrase, cliche or not, you got to start with the end in mind. And I get it. You got to sort of, for a lot of listeners out there, they probably relate to the fact that we're like, well, yeah, okay, great. It would be great to, have sell the business one day. But at the moment, I just want to pay a freaking bill.
Yeah. So where do we start if you're at that stage where I want to pay a freaking bill?
Well, I mean, I'm just, I suppose, more interested in, there's a lot of guys that are listening to this podcast right now. They've got successful businesses and they're like, okay, I'd like to sell it one day. What do I need to be doing? What have I got to implement? How do I find these strategic buyers? Where does what are some action steps?
You know what? The first one is really, really simple, and it's just making sure the company is lined up properly. And I think if there's only one thing that your listeners take away from this is that to answer this question is, am I selling to my perfect and ideal client?
Okay.
Everything can fall from that, because if you don't have the right client, and what I mean is, every company is set up to produce a certain product or service impeccably well. And all of our companies are different because of the machinery we have and our personalities and our market and the timing. But what is your company perfect at doing? What are you most profitable at doing? And then once you know that, understanding that, taking that offering to the market and finding the perfect client, so many problems melt away. So many problems melt away. I had a couple of painting companies in my past. One of the best named painting companies I had was called Ladderman Home Services, and I was Ladderman. That was my superhero name, and I understood my market. People that were afraid to go up a ladder. So as I walked up to the door of the house, I'd look at it and go, "These guys need gutter cleaning. These guys need painting. These guys need window washing." But I was trying to serve all sorts of things as I walked up to the door, instead of understanding my best, most valuable work was residential repainting of two-story houses. Boom. That's it. Not 3-story, because I didn't have the ladders. Not power washing, because I didn't have a power washer back then. Not bungalows, because they were too small for me to get scale. I had to do 2 of them in a week, and I could really only do 1 in a bit. And the rest of the week was wasted. But understanding my ideal client allowed me to be more profitable. 2-story homes, residential repaint, mostly wood, not stucco. And I ask your listeners, what's your ideal client? And are you perfectly arranged in the company to serve that person or account?
Yeah, right. And so does that come back to, I suppose, that conversation around like customer avatar and...
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. Who's that best customer? But it's beyond the avatar, because I think the avatar also takes into account the behavioral style of the person, et cetera. But we really want to understand who's our ideal client geographically. Right? Need-wise. I mean, geography becomes a big issue when you're in a city that has any amount of traffic at all. Because you can do a plumbing job next door, or you can do a plumbing job across town, and you get paid the same.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So I'd rather do 3 jobs within 12 blocks of my office than 4 jobs a day at all points, all corners of the city. I'm not going to make any money, and I'm going to burn myself out. So
let's presume for a minute that we're talking to people that, we're talking to business owners here that are established. They might be turning $5-10 million a year, and they're looking for an exit strategy. They know who their customers are. They've got plenty of work. What are the next stages?
It really comes down to having that communications and accountability in the company. And the less the owner is involved, the more viable that business is. So relying on really good meetings to run the business with really clear data information is the key, and not, as the owner, you should be trying to go into the office less. You're going to do it more of a favor. And I hope, this is an oldie but a goodie, but the book, The E-Myth Revisited, it is one of the best books ever. Yeah. And so if anybody needs a book to read, even in the bathroom, you should get that one.
Yeah. Michael Gerber,
The E-Myth Revisited.
So when we talk about, let's just dive into that a little bit more, great meetings and data. What are some of the metrics and some of the data that you measure at that sort of macro level when you're in a business that's looking for exit?
Well, again, it's different for every company, right? Every company wants to look at something a little bit different, but it still comes down to a couple of things. You want to start at the top of the funnel and start to understand things down from there. So just roughly, and this won't apply to every business, but imagine you're looking at a whiteboard and all it says on it is 5 categories. Number of bids we're waiting to hear back on. Number of jobs we sold this month, number of jobs in production, our cash flow receivables in the next 30, 60, and 90 days. And let's say number of open deficiencies so that we know, which jobs aren't closed or where we've got customer issues. And I just picked those 5 off the top of my head. That's a great place to start, though. But can you imagine if you had a meeting once or twice a week with your team just to talk about those issues?
Yeah, right.
And it was on the board for everybody to see.
Gotcha. We interrupt this podcast today to talk to you very quickly about Tradie Web Guy's content creation program. That program has been designed specifically for trade-based organizations as a way that you guys as trade business owners can start creating content that enables you to engage better with your customers and your potential customers. It will enable you to build trust and build rapport, because what you're doing is you're investing in educating them. Biggest problem that we see with our customers today is that they're not regularly updating their websites. And that's a problem because, first of all, the search engines are looking for that. And second of all, potential customers are also looking for it. Tradie Web Guy's content creation program has been specifically designed to help you get regular, relevant content on your website consistently every month. We know that it's hard when you're out there on the tools, and we know that sometimes you don't always have the time to be able to do these things yourself. So we're taking it off your hands for you. It's a service that we're offering for you guys. We want to make sure that you're getting this done because we know how important it is. Anyway, head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/content, fill in the form, and one of our representatives will come back to you. I know this is sort of a revelation that, I had earlier in the day. Like you can get so caught up tracking the wrong things. You're like, well, how much money have we made this week? How much, it always comes back to that. And I've worked in companies as well where they're like, okay, we'll do like a monthly review. Oh, you made this much money. We made this much money. It's not enough. And it just seems so stupid to be reviewing that as a metric when the reality behind that whole scenario is like you're only selling to the amount of leads that you're getting. So what kind of leads are we getting? What kind of impressions are we getting? How many, where is that coming from? Like I never really understood them, like, or the stupid thing when you're comparing next year's forecast against last year's forecast, but nothing else is changing within the organization. It's just expected that the number's going to increase. Like, I just feel like people just get so caught up with the wrong shit.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm glad they're thinking about it. Coming to the realization that we might be looking at the wrong number is in itself a valuable thing. But what is the right number comes down to something we call critical constraints.
Okay.
So here's what I'm going to ask your listeners to go buy themselves a cup of coffee, not a beer, because that takes you in a different direction, but leave the office.
We don't drink beer in Australia anyway.
Not at all. No, you guys are known for your ability to
water consumption.
Yeah. But go buy yourself a coffee alone. Leave the office. Just take a pad of paper and a pen and think about what's the most recurring problem you have in your company. You're not here to place blame on any one person, but where is that problem? Where are you spending most of your time fixing issues? That's a constraint or a critical constraint. It's the choke point in your company. Think about that thing and then think about the numbers that affect it, and you'll find your answer.
Yeah, okay.
And as you're right, it's the top of the funnel. If it's leads, there's no use worrying about number of customers unless you know how many leads you've got and what your conversion rate is.
Right.
Because the number of customers is an output. You can't do anything to get more customers. What you can do is you can get more qualified leads,
right,
and you can do a better job of selling to them or putting them on a maintenance program, and then you have more customers.
Yeah.
And you can't do anything about revenue, but we all worry about it.
Yeah.
Well, what you can do is you can take your number of customers and think, well, how many times do I sell to those people and how much do I sell to them every time I make a transaction? That gives me revenue. But revenue in itself is just an outcome.
Yeah.
And so focusing on the wrong outcomes or focusing on the outcomes is the wrong place to worry. You got to focus on the inputs.
I like it. Okay, cool. So for all the listeners out there, I suppose as a general framework about what we spoke about then, understand where your critical constraints are. I know actually it kind of reminds me, a friend and colleague of mine, Dave Dave Jennings from Melbourne SEO and System Hub. He helped Michael Gerber launch his recent book very successfully, I might add. Now, he's got something in his system profile which he calls critical client flow. And it's effectively what you just said, I suppose, maybe mapped out a little bit differently, but it's where you look at, I suppose, the journey of your customer, and then you establish this, like the critical journeys though. So, okay, like what is your, I suppose, when you break it down into products or services, okay, you've got, if you're delivering a furniture product, there is a critical client flow towards that, and it's made up of a series of steps. And then those are the steps that you need to start systemizing primarily. Otherwise, you can get caught up systemizing things that don't really make any difference.
Yeah, right. How we order staples.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Or, how to pick up the mail. Like, really? Okay, you go to the freaking post office and pick it up. It's not rocket science. So, yeah, I think it's kind of on a similar path to what you were just saying there.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yep.
All right, cool. So understanding those critical constraints, and then once you've got an understanding of those critical constraints, you can then start repairing them, I suppose.
Yeah, just picking it apart. This is the other thing that we don't do as owners is give ourselves how do you say it? We're not easy enough on ourselves to say, I can only fix one thing at a time.
Right.
So just do one thing don't do them all.
Right.
And by the way, I'm guilty of this. I want everything fixed right now.
Yep. I know, but isn't it amazing, like, when you do apply yourself to one thing, like, I don't know if you've heard of the Pomodoro technique, the 25-minute on, 5-minute off sort of thing.
Yeah.
For the listeners out there that aren't familiar with it, Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, and it's effectively a timer. And then every 25, you work in 25-minute blocks and you have a 5-minute break. Now, to be honest, I don't really follow it as strictly as I probably should, but the principle behind it is within that 25 minutes, you apply yourself to one specific task and you focus on that only. And you turn all your notifications off. You don't answer phone calls. You don't answer emails. You just work on that one thing. And you will be freaking amazed at how much productive work you can get done when you just focus on the one thing.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And I know, especially when you're talking about problem solving, like if you really want to knuckle down and get to the bottom of something, just turn everything off for a day and focus on that one thing. And at the end of the day, you'll more than likely have a solution and a roadmap to get you out of the pickle.
Yeah. It's just when we're focused on too many things, a beagle can only chase one bunny at a time. You ever heard that? Oh, so you Aussies think you have all the great sayings. We've got some great ones up here in Canada too, right?
I guess so.
That guy's crazier than a cricket on a can of corn.
Yeah.
But a beagle can only chase one bunny at a time. And there's a reason for that, because the beagle is focused and he can chase that bunny until he gets the bunny.
Right.
But he can't chase them all. And it's the same with us.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, that's the first step then, I suppose. Like we've gone through understanding the client, we've gone through the internal communications, and getting an understanding of your metrics. Obviously, sounds obvious, but it's so not obvious. Understanding where your constraints and your bottlenecks are, because then you can build back from there. And then, what else do I need to do to prepare myself for somebody who's going to come along and buy my business as a strategic buyer?
I think my first answer is do it. And then hearing you repeat the steps back, it occurred to me that what I actually have to do is I have to impress on my team how important it is to do this even when I'm not there. Right? So if I don't take it seriously, they won't take it seriously.
Right.
And so it takes a little bit to get this ball rolling, but it's the discipline that's required for that excellence. And that excellence can come through in more time for you as an owner, or more profit for you as an owner, or somebody buying you if that's what you want. But if we don't take it seriously, then you know what happens with the team. They're like, oh, the boss read another book this week. Yeah. Okay, let's wait till he forgets about it. No, you've got to focus on it and commit to it almost with fervor, like religiously. And so they know this is how we do it here. And that in itself is a system.
Gotcha. And a lot of these things, especially when we talk about metrics and that kind of stuff, a lot of it can be like relatively automated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the numbers should be simple.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be complex numbers at all.
Okay, so systems and I get it. So, okay, how do you get all that stuff above to run without you necessarily being the one to run it? I know my buddy Darren, I don't know if you heard his podcast recently. He runs a kitchen cabinetry business in Sydney here, so he's probably going to be very interested in your stuff. But he's basically got his business to a point where he now lives overseas, and he goes skiing in Verbier in the winter, and then he sails around Turkey in the summer. And that's as a result of setting up systems and processes. But his team runs that. His team runs those meetings. But again, I guess that comes as a result of having that right framework and responsibilities, departments' roles, responsibilities in place, and then having systems that are built around that so they can deliver on those things consistently without him having to be there.
Right. That's it, as a result of it. It's exactly how you said it. It's because he put that discipline in the beginning that he can do that now.
So, how does that look? I mean, I know we've been talking a lot recently about, organizational structure and putting into, businesses that department structure. So you've got the business broken down, then within the departments, you've got roles, and then within the roles, you've got responsibilities that need to be delivered on, and they can be assigned to people, et cetera, et cetera. Is that really the starting point?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, it's really no more complex than that. It's the hard part is keeping it simple. It's easy to make it complicated.
Yeah.
Right? Very easy.
Because I've found of late, that's been the biggest revelation. And, you can read these things and you can have people tell you this stuff over and over and over again. And then one day it's like, holy shit, why don't we just do this? And it's like, well, dude, like you've been reading that for years, but it just, when there's something becomes relevant all of a sudden.
And this is going to sound self-serving, but I don't want it to. So it's still valuable enough for me to say that I'm going to get past that. Is that I read fitness books, but I don't work out right unless I've got a trainer there.
Right.
And it's the very same thing. Find somebody you can work with, somebody that's trained and that has the right intent as your coach or your mentor, your advisor, whatever it is. But find that person who understands your goal and is going to help you work towards that, because it's just like having a personal trainer at the gym. You'll get your best results when you have a trainer. I mean, if you sent your kids off to school and the head of the school said, listen, we're not going to have any teachers in the class this week, the kids should be okay. You'd flip your lid, you'd lose it. Right? And at the same time, if you sat down, I understand you like baseball, Matt.
Oh, yeah.
So let's say your favorite team took to the field and you're sitting there, you just crack your favorite beverage, you sit back and the announcer says, and this week, unbelievably, the team is taken to the field without a coaching staff. What would you say?
Well,
yeah. I mean,
better get another beer.
Yeah, better get no beer. The game's over, right? So it's the same thing here, though, is if you're a business owner who really wants to make these changes, find somebody that you enjoy working with that can help you make these changes.
Yeah. I suppose as well, it's funny, and coaching can come in a lot of forms. And like I have experienced this on so many occasions throughout my personal and professional life where, like, I've just gone through it recently. I've reread one of my colleagues and friends and regular guests on the podcast, Mr. Al Levy, the 7-Power Contractor, and I've just reread his book. And this second time round, it's absolutely blown my socks off. And I'm flicking through it right now, and it's just like full of highlighted and dog-eared pages and pens.
Yeah.
And like the form of a coach can come in many different ways. It could be a podcast, it could be a book, it could be a one-on-one coaching program, it could be a number of different things. But the point is, there's a lot of stuff out there. You just got to go and get your hands on it.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it should be from multiple areas. You should be open to learning, not closed to it. I had a similar experience with Vern Harnish's book, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. The first time I read it, I didn't get it. I didn't get it at all. And then the second time I read it, I thought, this is the greatest book I've ever read. What happened? How stupid was the first guy? But I didn't get it at all. Yeah. And it took 2 times to understand it. And that's actually the framework that, people use for strategic planning is that book. And it's really solid.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose if you're ever going to frame any business models off anyone, it may as well be the Rockefellers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. And I think sometimes as business owners, I think one of the big mistakes that a lot of business owners make is they don't read books, for one. And then I think the second mistake they probably make is they may not be willing to revisit a book based off that experience the first time. I know every time I read E-Myth, I get something else out of it. I do every time. You know
that it can be difficult. Imagine, and I agree with you, but I think there's a way around it, and podcasts like this are the way around it. A university course is something like 30 hours of education. Right. 30 hours. If a business owner switches their activities, their behaviors, and listens to podcasts on the drive to work, so an hour, let's just round it to an hour every day. So an hour into work, or half hour into work, a half hour out. So you're listening to an hour a day. In less than a month, you can have as much university education as your kids are getting in a university course. Yeah. And it's free. I mean, downloading your podcast with great information and fantastic guests, and obviously not just this podcast, any of them, or audiobooks. Yeah. The knowledge is out there, and knowledge is the currency of the new economy. It doesn't matter what your trade is. It's knowledge that will take you above everybody else because everybody's got the same tools. Yeah, exactly right. And why wouldn't you want to turn your car or your work truck into a university? I mean, it just makes sense. Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do? Listen to talkback radio and commercials? I mean, come on. I call it burp fart radio. I don't want to listen to the morning show jokes anymore. And I don't want to listen to Drake. My kids listen to that stuff. They think my stuff is boring, but my stuff's what pays for the gas and the car. So. Right, exactly. So you will listen to it. And you will like it. And that's Daddy's voice. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. There's no, there's nothing better than jumping in a car and listening to me. I apologize to the listeners out there. Oh, enough about me. Let's talk about me. All right, cool. So we've gone through that
like as you say, okay, cool, let's make sure that you can deliver on all of those things in a way that the team can execute that and you don't have to be the one doing it, which comes as a result of systems, frameworks, and then of course training, right? Like you've got to, I think this is another thing, like I was having this conversation yesterday with one of my businesses, guys, it's great if you're, doing these, recording these tutorials, but if you're not putting it into a framework where people can go back to and they can actually, find it, then what's the point? It just gets lost in the myriad of, content that we create both internally and externally. So how does the training process look, Dom? Like, how do you make sure that people are following the processes, keeping them updated, keeping them relevant?
Yeah. You mean, how do I train my support team to
replace you?
Yeah, replace me, exactly. Well, the first thing we start with is quite often there's resistance from the owners. They're like, well, I don't want to train my guys. What if I train them and they leave?
Yeah.
And the answer, and I have to say it without sounding smug, is what if you don't train them and they stay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Which one is worse? But in reality, people want to be on a winning team. And if your team is providing education and you really are bought into this system, it's a better place to work. So look for trainers or do the training yourself or bring in a trainer on specific things that help the big question you've got. So if the question right now is lead flow, like bringing in new leads, there's a ton of companies that are willing to come in and talk about social media marketing to your team at a lunch and learn, and they'll probably pay for the lunch.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're going to sign with those people, but they'll do free workshops all day long. So bring them in and educate your team. And your team is the better for it. You'll get great ideas. And again, wherever your constraint is, let's say it's on the manufacturing process. I said the manufacturing floor because my listeners are cabinet makers and architectural mill workers. But if you've got field staff, there are lean manufacturing experts or safety people that can talk to our team and just make the company better.
Yeah. And do you deliver that sort of thing on like a structured frequency? Is it like, well, it's the first Friday of the month. Today we're going to be doing an internal toolbox talk or a workshop on blah.
Yeah. Well, you see, so you automatically went to how do I systematize this? How do I do it on a regular repeating basis? If I can go back another level, I'm going to get a bit geeky on you here, but the system that you just introduced there is something called a block schedule or a default diary. And that is the tool of a multi-business entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right? You lay out your week at a glance that has all the days and all the hours listed. And you know that every Tuesday at 2, you're doing your management meeting. And every Wednesday at 1, you're doing your finance and forecast meeting. And it's every week at that time. And your team gets trained that that's the system we follow here.
And so is that like a physical calendar that everyone can see typically?
It is, yes.
Yeah. And so part of the training would be, or part of the, I won't say training, but part of the expectation, I mean, initially with that process would be, it's your job to check this calendar daily. You need to know what's happening in that calendar every day.
Yeah. And we always know that Wednesday at 1 is the finance and forecast meeting.
Right.
And it's just part of the company, to the point that if that meeting gets missed, people feel a little bit let down by the company. And that's what you want, because now the team is bought into the system, right? So the first person that has to buy into the default diary is the owner. Yeah. And then they've got to teach and train their people on the importance of it and get them using it as well. It's a very simple tool. It's super effective. And you simply, once you've gone to it, you can't run a business without it, because otherwise you're always reactive.
I think you've subtly stepped on a extremely relevant stone there, which is, the fish rots from the head down. Like if you as the business owner or the leader is not going to be willing to fly the flag for this new movement, then you can't expect your team to.
Yeah, forget it. If you don't care about safety, your team won't care about safety. If you don't care about drug use in the workplace, your team won't care about it. Yeah. If you don't care about time management, neither will your team.
Yeah. All right, cool. So now we've got that in place. We've gone through, we've tracked our metrics. We've got our critical constraints down. We've got structured training and delivery based around that block schedule and, the calendars and the meeting structure and that kind of thing. What else am I looking at?
You know what? That you're really there.
Right.
Once you have that kind of discipline in the business, rinse and repeat.
Right.
It doesn't have to be complex. It's just find the systems that work, set your regular recurring meetings, know what numbers you're going to talk about at those meetings, and then run the meeting effectively. I hope you don't mind. I've got another download. It's actually one of the most popular downloads on my site.
Yep.
And it's called How to Run the Finance and Forecast Meeting.
Ooh.
And it's got the agenda and the script. So the owner has everything there. You just hand it out to your team, and it even has a script for what to go through. But once you have those regular meetings, people know what to expect. Just keep rinsing and repeating. And that's the consistency that we want to bring to a team.
Isn't it funny? So literally in the last week, because we've got so many meetings going on within the different businesses and things like that, I reached out to, and again, as I was saying before, I'm just reading through this book, and I came to this part of the book, which I literally did not even see last time I read it. It was like I picked up an entirely new book, and I was like, holy shit. Like, there's a whole section right here in front of me on what Al calls his meeting manifesto, and it's basically how to structure like meetings. And on Thursday, I'm recording a podcast with him on his meeting manifesto. Like, I rang him and I go, dude, did you just add this to this book that's been sitting on my shelf for like the last year? He's like, oh, Matt, geez, you're so young and dumb, and then he sent me through all this other stuff, and I was like, this is incredible. So off the back of that, I went and created this, this meeting framework and this document, which I'm going to be sharing with our whole audience. Anyone can get access to that based off, I suppose, my experience of where the meetings are starting, were absolutely just becoming like a complete waste of freaking time, to the point now where they're completely structured, they're minuted, they're documented, like everyone's buying into them. It's been a complete revelation. So I would love to see your how to run the finance and forecast meeting framework.
I'll include it for you to put in your show notes, but it's also on my site, and that's just the keywords, how to run it. And people seem to like scripts, so I include scripts with a lot of the things that I do. And that doesn't mean they have to follow my script, because my jokes, I burn the bad jokes right in there. Yeah, and then you've got all that work to get them back out. Yeah. But, but you know what I like, Matt, in listening to you, is that you are very open about being both a student and a teacher.
Oh, I'm the biggest student.
You're bought into this stuff.
Oh, yeah. I do not know. This is why I have people like yourselves on the show, because I don't know shit.
Well, I don't want to tell you this out loud because you might be recording it, but neither do I. But it's constant learning. I think where I've run into problems with people that I've worked with is when they've said, I'm done learning, I'm just going to teach. Right. And I do the best with my clients when I start with, I don't know the answer to this. Yeah. I don't know. But we're going to figure it out. Here's what it, and then we have a process. We have a system for hacking apart a problem. But it's impossible for any of us to have every answer to everything.
It's like that. It's like that old. Oh yeah, personal development. I remember doing that. It's like, oh yeah. My friend and mentor and a business associate now, Peter Cox, leadership guru. He's always said, Jonesy, personal development's like showering, mate. You don't just do it once.
Yeah, that's true. Good. Yeah. That's very good, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, cool. So now that we've sort of, I suppose we've got an understanding of that framework, and we just basically take that, we rinse and repeat. How then do we go about finding people that may be potential buyers, or how do we pitch it, or how do we get it out there? Like, what's that about?
Well, so that is very interesting, because if you want that strategic buyer, or if you want that entrepreneurial buyer, or if heaven forbid you want the opportunistic buyer, knowing what the creature you've built is best. And if you're in that world, let's just use the strategic buyer, because that's the one that pays above fair market value. You would know, and when you look at the graphic, you'll understand it actually takes a lot longer to close a deal with them, and it's a longer process to sell to them.
Of course.
But then you've got something, if you do want to go through a broker, there's brokers out there, but they'll understand the value and be able to market you that much better. Yeah. But the other thing that'll be happening is you'll be popping up on lists, right? The top plumbing company in Sydney. Right. And somebody's going to see that from Adelaide, and they're going to go, did I pronounce that right?
Adelaide? Yeah, you did actually. Well done.
How about Melbourne? Did I say Melbourne right?
You did say Melbourne right. That's very rare for North American. It's normally Melbourne.
Melbourne. Dang, you got to go to Melbourne. Anyways, let's say one of those other cities. Yeah. They're going to see that list, and guess what? They're going to come knocking. Mm-hmm. Or you're going to get a phone call from their broker or their accountant that says, hey, Fred's in town. He'd really like to have a coffee. And you're just flying in a different group. That's on the strategic side. On the entrepreneurial side, if you want to sell it to your kids, just as a that's the most common thing on the entrepreneurial side, especially in trades, is I want my son or my nephew, my nieces to take over this business. Then we have to have something that's sellable to them, and they have to understand that process. But we know that when we hand it over to them, they're able to keep the cash flow going to pay us.
Gotcha. Right. So in that scenario, would it be sort of, yeah, okay, take over the business, but then I'm taking a percentage until it's paid off? Is that kind of how it works? as opposed to give me $1 million?
So there's a million things. I'll tell you one of the highlights, or one of the first wins in coaching. We call this easy wins early. And I mentioned before, Adrian Fedini and I know each other. Adrian would recognize this from our training. One of the first easy wins that you can introduce to a business owner is to ask them whether they own their real estate or rent it or lease it.
Okay.
And it's easy to lease, it's easy to rent. The problem is, when you pay that first dollar on that first month, if you own that place, that's the most expensive month you'll ever be there, because now you've paid down principal and interest a little bit, right? It's going to decrease over time, and you have that asset. That asset is separate than the business.
Okay.
When you go to sell the business, you can now stay the landlord and sell the business.
Gotcha.
If you lease or rent your space, every month that you pay your rent is always the most expensive month, because it never changes. You just pay that money to stay in a hotel, which is called your office and your shop,
right,
for the month, but you don't get any value other than time spent. So you're actually not advancing. So there we're thinking strategically about how to invest our money. And it can be difficult in some markets. The prices of real estate are insane, but you also have to think about what the long-term future is. So once you've done that, you can, when you sell it to your kids or somebody else, you can keep the real estate and stay the landlord. Right? That's one particular strategy.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So, but I mean, like, how do you pop up on the radars, I suppose, is what I'm saying. Like, if you've got a business that's got all this structure and stuff in place, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that, a potential buyer in Adelaide is going to be like, oh, I'm just looking at my system log here and apparently they've got good ones. Like, how do you...
Well, you will show up on those things, because once you start to, have you ever heard the saying that you're most like the 5 people you hang out with?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's the same for me and it's the same for you. And it'll be the same for your business. When you start to run at a different level, you'll start to hang out, quote unquote, with other businesses. You'll go to different trainings, you'll go to different events, and you'll meet people. You'll get asked to sit on boards. You'll get asked to just sit, and not formally on boards, unless that's what you want, but you'll just be out there. Your vendors will know who you are, and that vendor is selling their supplies to you, and they're selling them to that big company in Adelaide.
Yeah.
And he is going to, your ideal buyer is taking that company out for dinner saying, look, we want to expand to Sydney. Who are your top companies there? And what you really want is for the owner of that supplier to say, you got to go meet Matt.
Yeah.
This guy is dialed in. That thing churns out nothing but cash. And your problem with buying from Matt is he's never around.
Right.
You're going to have to go to France to meet him on the slopes.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's a company I want to buy.
Right.
Right?
Okay, cool. So, I mean, look, I suppose realistically, the whole dynamic here is getting back to that initial framework, right? Because there's no point in even talking about who might want to buy the company until we have something that's built the way they want, to the level and expectation of something that they would want to purchase.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need to know who the buyer is. I just know my ideal purchaser is a strategic purchaser. Just like if I'm running a cabinet shop, I don't need to know who my next deal is. I just need to know that my ideal client is a residential home over 10,000 square feet in that neighborhood, or it's a commercial improvement in a law firm. Whatever my ideal client is, it's the same thing we're applying here to the types of buyers.
So, Dom, when you hear people say you've got to begin with the end in mind, you've got to start with the end goal. What is that end goal? Is that relevant, or is that just all smoke and mirrors?
No, it's 100% relevant.
And so then once you've got that idea, you say, okay, cool. Well, I'm starting with the end in mind. I want to sell my business to it might be a building company, a cabinet company, someone of the likes within the next 10 years. In order for me to do that, I need to reverse engineer what that's going to look like, that journey. I need to have these systems in place. I can't be here. I need to be skiing on the slopes of France, blah, blah, blah. And then build it backwards, yeah?
Yeah. You just don't do that. You're taking away my livelihood. You just made my job sound easy. No, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Reverse engineer it. And do I have another minute?
Man, you got time. Go for it.
All right. So this is a story that Brian Tracy told me, because I've had many conversations with Brian over dinner as well as, on stage and things like that. And Brian tells this story, and I don't know where the story comes from, but I've heard it from Brian, about this young lady who wanted more in her life than what her family had provided. And she made a conscious decision. She said, okay, now, it's time for me to find the right husband. And so she said, I'm going to go to a church in the nice part of town, because she was not from the nice part of town. And when I go to that church, I'm going to join the choir so I can meet other people there. And of course, what happens? She goes to a church in a more affluent part of town. and she joins the choir. And there's a young man who also is in the choir, and he's from the affluent part of town. And she crafted that change in her life to change her outcome because it wasn't going the way that she originally wanted. And that's a story on from the social side, but it's exactly the same for us here. Is aim for what you want. This is your life. You can have anything you want as long as you ask for it.
We would call that a really clever gold digger.
Yeah, I'd call it that too. I'd call it that too. But I'll tell you what, if my job is to make the story stick,
that's it.
I did it.
It just stuck. Win.
And you know what? Somebody in the audience is listening going, is that what Christine did to me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Hey, I know. I used to date her.
I know.
I'm married to her. Damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, man, I think that's been pretty good. Is there anything there that you think we've missed or anything you want to, I suppose, cover off on or add to?
You know what? There is one thing, and you just made me think of it. And it's this phrase, that won't work here.
Okay, explain.
And I want people to remember, I mean, for your listeners, the bulk of your listeners in Australia and perhaps in New Zealand and the South Pacific area, it might be obvious, but I'm not from Australia. I don't live there. I'm not even there right now. Did anything I say not make sense over there?
It was pretty relevant, I think, I mean, maybe I'm biased, so because I listen to a lot of this sort of stuff, but it seemed pretty.
Yeah, but that's the point. And the comments you were making back apply here where I live in Vancouver and definitely in the United States. And I've done business like this all over the world. The reason I ask that question is because so often the resistance that we hear from a business owner, doesn't matter the business, says, but you don't understand. That won't work.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
And that is just BS. It will work here. What isn't working is
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so funny. This is actually, it was one of the reasons why, because we were talking so much about systems and, removing yourself from operations and all this kind of stuff. I had my buddy Darren on the show because the best way to dispel or, diffuse an argument is to put someone who's done exactly that in that spot and say, well, yeah, it works. I've done it. How can you say, no, it doesn't work if someone's done it, So I could not agree more with that. And I hear this bullshit day in, day out from people saying that. I've got one mate especially, and he's just he will not listen. He's like, you don't understand. My business is so me. And I'm like, man, it always will be until you change your mind. It's up to you, So
yeah, it's completely up to you.
I'm really
I had, as I said, I had Evan Dunstone on, and he's from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Evan, I'm so sorry that I cannot remember what city you're in. He's in Queanbeyan, New South Wales.
Queanbeyan.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. That's unfortunate. Okay. On a side note, for all your listeners that are overseas, Queanbeyan was at one point until they banned it. They banned the fireworks anyway. It was the firework capital of Australia, but it was also the porn capital of Australia. And I'm pretty sure it still is the porn capital of Australia. So
that did not come up in our meeting, in our podcast.
But you've got
to
a
this
topic
point,
of conversation to talk to him about now.
I'm going to tell him that now. But his podcast is one of the out of the top 10. His is number 6, and he's only been posted on my podcast for a couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah.
So people are, the people that are out there listening for new ideas understand that it will work here. I just have to figure out how I can make it work here.
No, absolutely, yeah. And I think, to be fair, I think when you talk about different markets, and the reason that we love getting people from all over the world on the podcast is because it does give a different perspective that's highly relevant. And, you can argue that until you're blue in the face, but the bottom line is, at the end of the day, although we may be living in different countries, the principles that help us run successful businesses are very similar, if not identical.
Identical. Yeah. I've had the fortune to do this all around the world and train coaches all around the world. And through that, I hear business stories from everywhere. And the only places it doesn't work is crazy places like Venezuela, where it's just a gong show.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine in a lot of cases, even that the principles are probably similar, but then the red tape and hurdles
the
help you get there.
Dictatorship gets in the way.
A lot of problems that we're luckily not to be have to experience where we live. But anyway, Dom, thank you for your time, man. It's been awesome.
It has been a great interview. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been the best one I've done all day, and I'm really looking forward to the next one. So, Dom Rubino from Cabinet Maker Profit System. Where can people get hold of you, mate?
You know what? Right there at the website, cabinetmakerprofitsystem.com, or on the podcast. And of course, I'm on Facebook and all sorts of social media that I don't even run. So when you respond there, my assistant will forward it to me right away. Okay. But any questions at all, I'd love to hear from people, and I'll anything I can forward or help with, let me know.
Yeah, cool. So that does happen. I warn you, you've got to be very careful when you give offers like that to Australians, because they will very often take you up on it, where I found that North Americans don't often. A prime example of that was when I lived in Colorado, and we had these guests come to the hotel from San Diego in California. And I think as a fly-by comment, they'd come to the bar every day. I was working in the bar there, and we had a great time. And they always said, hey, listen, if you ever come to San Diego, be sure to look us up. Here's my phone number. Give us a call. You can come stay with us. And so sure enough, ski season came to an end, and I thought, I'm going to get those guys from San Diego a call. So I rang this lady, and I was like, hey, you may or may not remember me. I was your bartender in Aspen. She's like, oh my God, what happened? Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just coming out to see you. She's like, what? So we did. We were there, sleeping in the spare room. It was good fun.
Yeah, why not, right? This is your life. You can ask for anything you want.
Right, exactly. So
people can just say no.
So look, any of you listeners out there, if you do have any questions around that whole, how to sell your business, or if there's any part of that framework that you weren't sure about, or you want a clarification, by all means, post some comments wherever you see this coming across your channels, whether that's social media or it might be in an email. Or you could even just leave a comment if you wanted on one of the iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, whatever that is. And I will endeavor to get Dom back to answer that. I will be posting links to all of his podcasts and those resources that he's going to leave behind within the show notes, and also in the resource section of the SiteShed website. So you can head across to the siteshed.com to get hold of that stuff. And yeah, man, it's been great. So thanks very much for your time once again. Much appreciated. And man, we'll really look forward to collaborating in the future.
Yeah, I as well. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Rock and roll. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to the siteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.